Welcome to today's deep dive, where we're tackling something I think we can all relate to, quieting that busy mind of yours. We're going to explore some seriously practical wisdom from the world of Buddhism to help you find some inner peace. Our main source today is an article that lays out 9 Buddhist teachings for combating overthinking. Because let's be honest, who hasn't felt like their brain just won't hit the off switch?
Yeah.
Stuck in that loop of worries and what ifs. It's like our minds are these incredible thought-generating machines that sometimes go a little haywire. Luckily, we have an expert here to help us unpack some powerful strategies for finding calm amidst all that mental chaos. What's fascinating about the Buddhist approach is that it offers a really practical perspective on how our minds work and how we can actually train them for more peace and clarity. The first teaching we're going to dive into is the concept of impermanence. Have you ever noticed how everything in life is constantly changing? Well, that goes for our thoughts and feelings too. They're not these solid, permanent things.
Right.
They arise, they hang out for a bit, and then they fade away. Just like everything else, it's like trying to hold on to water. It just slips through your fingers.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get so fixated on a thought, especially if it's a negative one. It's like I give it all this power, and it ends up dictating my whole mood.
Exactly. And that's where the suffering comes in, according to Buddhism. It's not the thoughts themselves, but our clinging to them that creates the problem. This article uses a great analogy to illustrate this. Imagine watching leaves floating down a river. Instead of trying to grab onto each leaf as it passes, we can simply observe them drift by. So instead of getting caught up in each thought, we can practice observing them with a sense of detachment. It's like saying, oh, there's a worry thought. Interesting. Now it's floating away. We call this non-attachment, essentially letting go of the need to control or fixate on those thoughts. You can even try this right now. Notice a thought arising in your mind. Maybe label it thinking. And just watch it float away. Don't engage with it. Don't judge it. Just observe it like you would those leaves on the river. And that leads us beautifully to the second Buddhist teaching, which is all about cultivating mindfulness. Now, you might have heard this term tossed around a lot, but what does it actually mean in practice? Mindfulness is the practice of bringing your attention to the present moment. It's the opposite of what our overthinking minds tend to do, which is get stuck in the past or lost in future worries. It's like pressing the pause button on that mental hamster wheel and simply noticing what's happening right here, right now.
I am so guilty of this. I can spend hours creating these elaborate what-if scenarios in my head, even if they're totally unlikely to happen. It's exhausting.
I think we all do that to some extent. Our minds are wired to try and predict the future, but that often leads to anxiety.
Yeah.
So how do we actually practice mindfulness? The article suggests using your breath as an anchor. The breath is a brilliant tool for anchoring ourselves to the present moment, because it's always with us. Whenever you notice your mind racing, simply take a few deep breaths. Really feel the air entering and leaving your body. It's such a simple act, yet it can have a profound effect on calming your nervous system and bringing you back to the here and now.
Okay, that makes sense. I can see how that would be helpful, but if I'm being honest, sometimes surrendering to what I can't control feels downright impossible.
That's a really valid point. It goes against our natural instinct to want to control things.
Right, absolutely. This is where the next Buddhist teaching comes in, and it's a big one, recognizing that thoughts are not facts. We tend to treat our thoughts as if they're absolute truths, but the Buddhist perspective challenges us to question that assumption. Wait, so you're saying that even my most negative, convincing thoughts aren't necessarily true? How do you even begin to wrap your head around that?
It's a real shift in perspective. But think about it this way. Our thoughts are just mental events, interpretations shaped by our past experiences, our fears, and our desires. They're not necessarily accurate reflections of reality.
So it's like our minds are constantly trying to create stories, even if those stories aren't particularly helpful or true.
Exactly. And the article suggests we practice detaching from those stories. Instead of getting caught up in the content of our thoughts, we can simply observe them with a sense of detachment, see them as passing mental events, not hard and fast truths. We can even use the leaf analogy here again. We don't need to grab onto every thought, analyze it, and judge ourselves for having it. We can just let it float on by.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. That's actually kind of liberating.
It really is. And when we can do that, we create space for more peace and clarity. Our thoughts lose their grip on us, and we start to see things with a fresh perspective. This leads us to the fourth teaching, which is all about surrendering to what we can't control.
I have a feeling this one is going to be tough for me. I like to feel like I have a handle on things, but sometimes that can backfire.
I hear you. It's really common, especially in today's world where we're encouraged to strive for control and achievement. But Buddhism reminds us that our desire for control often fuels overthinking. We want to predict outcomes, prevent mistakes, and make sure everything goes according to plan. But clinging to that control actually creates more suffering. Life is inherently uncertain. Things happen that are outside of our control, no matter how much we plan or analyze.
How do we even begin to let go of that need to control?
This is where it gets interesting. The article suggests asking yourself a simple question. Is this within my control? If the answer is yes, then by all means, take action. But if the answer is no, then the best course of action is to surrender. It's like trying to push a river upstream. It's exhausting and futile. Instead, we can practice acceptance and allow things to unfold as they will. Now, this doesn't mean being passive. It's about choosing your battles wisely and focusing your energy where it can truly make a difference.
So, in a way, it's about being more mindful about where we direct our energy. We can either waste it on worrying about things we can't change, or we can channel it into taking action where it matters.
That's a great way to put it. It's about choosing to be effective rather than just busy.
This ties in beautifully with the next Buddhist teaching, self-compassion.
Ooh, I like the sound of that already.
Overthinking often goes hand in hand with harsh self-judgment, that inner voice that's constantly pointing out your flaws and telling you you're not good enough.
Ugh, tell me about it. I can be my own worst critic.
Buddhism offers an antidote to this. Self-compassion. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and forgiveness that you would offer to a good friend.
That sounds lovely in theory, but how do we actually put it into practice? I know I wouldn't talk to a friend the way I sometimes talk to myself.
It takes practice, for sure. But imagine you're talking to a dear friend who is struggling. What would you say to them? You likely offer words of comfort and encouragement. You'd remind them of their strengths and help them see the situation in a more balanced way. Well, we can learn to extend that same kindness to ourselves. It's like becoming your own best friend, your own cheerleader.
Exactly, and the Buddha himself said, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection.
What a powerful reminder. Instead of berating yourself for your mistakes, offer yourself understanding and support. You deserve it.
Okay, that's a lot to take in, but it's really resonating with me. What's next on our list of Buddhist teachings to combat overthinking?
Let's talk about embracing simplicity.
Now, that sounds appealing. Modern life can feel so overwhelming with constant information, choices, and demands on our attention. It's like my brain can never fully relax.
Absolutely, and all of that input is a breeding ground for overthinking. Buddhism reminds us that simplicity is a pathway to peace. When we declutter our minds, our actions, and our surroundings, we create space for calmness and clarity to emerge. I feel like I intuitively know this to be true. I definitely feel my best when I've got a clear schedule, a tidy workspace, and a few moments of quiet built into my day. It's like my brain can finally exhale.
That makes perfect sense. And there are some simple, practical ways to invite more simplicity into your life. The article calls it mental decluttering. Just like we might declutter our homes by getting rid of things we no longer need or use, we can do the same with our thoughts. Ask yourself, is this thought helpful? Is it serving me? If not, let it go.
It's like Marie Kondoing our minds, only keeping the thoughts that spark joy.
Exactly. And another powerful way to simplify is to reduce external noise. Limit your time on social media, news, and other distractions that tend to amplify mental chatter. Instead, create pockets of stillness in your day. Even just a few minutes of quiet contemplation can make a world of difference.
I'm noticing a theme here. Quieting the mind, letting go of what we can't control, being kind to ourselves. It's all so interconnected.
You're absolutely right. These teachings all support each other, and they lead beautifully into the next teaching, which is all about the power of gratitude.
Gratitude is an incredibly powerful antidote to overthinking because it shifts our focus from what's missing or what's wrong to what's present and what's good in our lives. I totally agree. Whenever I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, taking a few moments to appreciate the good things, even small things, really helps shift my perspective.
Like a mental reset button.
Right. The article suggests a simple gratitude practice. Try listing 3 things you're thankful for each day.
I love that. Such a simple practice. Yet it can have such a profound impact. It's like training our brains to look for the positive instead of getting stuck in negativity.
Exactly. And the more we practice gratitude, the more natural it becomes. It starts to permeate our outlook on life. Okay, on to the next teaching. This one seems particularly relevant in today's achievement-oriented culture, letting go of attachment to outcomes.
This is a big one. So much of our overthinking stems from our fear of failure, rejection, or disappointment. We get so fixated on specific outcomes that we create a lot of anxiety for ourselves.
It's so true. I know I've definitely sabotaged myself in the past by putting so much pressure on a particular outcome. Like the fear of not achieving it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
From the Buddhist perspective, attachment to outcomes is a major source of suffering because life is inherently unpredictable. Things don't always go according to plan. Instead of clinging to how we think things should be, we can practice acceptance and allow things to unfold as they will.
But wait, does that mean we should just give up on our goals and ambitions?
Not at all. It's more about shifting our mindset. Instead of thinking, I must succeed at this, we can reframe it to, I'll do my best and accept whatever happens. This takes the pressure off and allows us to approach our goals with more ease and joy.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about focusing on the effort and the process rather than getting caught up in the end result. It's like the saying, enjoy the journey, not just the destination.
Precisely. And this brings us to the final teaching highlighted in the article, which beautifully ties everything together: meditation.
Meditation. I know it's good for me, but I'll admit I've struggled to make it a consistent habit.
It's definitely a practice. It can take time to find a style that resonates with you, but even a few minutes a day can have a noticeable impact on your mental well-being.
So what's so special about meditation? How does it actually help with all this overthinking?
Meditation is like a gym for the mind. It trains you to be more present, to observe your thoughts without judgment, and to cultivate a sense of inner stillness. It strengthens your mindfulness muscle, so you can more easily access those skills in your daily life.
It's like we're creating a pause button for our brains, a space where we can step back from the constant stream of thoughts and just be.
Exactly. And the more we practice, the more easily we can access that sense of peace and calm, even amidst the chaos of daily life.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. I feel like I've already gained so much practical wisdom from these Buddhist teachings.
Me too. They offer such a profound yet accessible framework for understanding how our minds work and for cultivating more peace and well-being.
Okay, before we wrap up this first part, I want to touch on one more point that the article mentions. It talks about the importance of our environment and the people we surround ourselves with.
That's an important point to bring up. The Buddha emphasized the importance of what he called wise companionship. The people we spend time with have a huge influence on our thoughts, our emotions, and our overall well-being.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If we're constantly surrounded by negativity, drama, or chaos, it's going to impact our mental state.
Absolutely. Surrounding yourself with people who are supportive, positive, and who share your values can make a world of difference. It creates a more nurturing environment for your mind to thrive. So as we move into the second part of our deep dive, think about the people you choose to spend your time with. Are they lifting you up or dragging you down? Food for thought.
So we've covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much to uncover. Are you ready to continue our exploration of these Buddhist teachings?
Absolutely. I'm finding this all so fascinating.
Me too. And it's really striking me how practical and applicable these ancient teachings are to our modern lives.
It's like they had overthinking figured out centuries ago.
Right. So let's dive back in. We left off talking about the importance of our environment and the people we surround ourselves with, which is a great segue into the next teaching, letting go of outcomes. I know we touched on this briefly earlier, but I think it deserves more attention.
Especially since our culture is so obsessed with achievement and success. It's easy to get caught in the trap of thinking we need certain things to happen in order to be happy.
And that's where overthinking really takes hold. We start worrying about all the things that could go wrong, and we put so much pressure on ourselves to achieve specific outcomes.
It's like we're constantly striving for this imaginary finish line, and we never allow ourselves to just enjoy the journey.
Buddhism suggests a different approach, letting go of attachment to outcomes. No, that doesn't mean we should give up on our goals altogether. It's more about shifting our mindset. Instead of thinking, I must achieve this, we can reframe it to, I'll do my best and accept whatever happens. This takes the pressure off and allows us to approach our goals with more ease and joy.
So it's about focusing on the effort and the process, rather than getting caught up in the end result. It's like the saying, enjoy the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly. And this brings us to the 8th teaching, which beautifully complements the idea of letting go of outcomes, embracing the unknown.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this.
So much of our overthinking stems from our feel of the unknown. We want to predict what's going to happen, control every situation. and avoid any surprises. But the reality is, life is full of uncertainty.
And that uncertainty can be a source of anxiety if we let it.
So how do we embrace the unknown instead of fearing it?
It starts with recognizing that our attempts to control everything are often futile. We can't predict the future, no matter how much we try. Instead, we can practice surrendering to the flow of life, accepting that things will unfold as they will.
But isn't that a bit passive? Doesn't that mean just letting life happen to us instead of taking charge?
Not at all. It's about recognizing that there's a difference between what we can control and what we can't. We can still set goals, make plans, and take action. But we do so with the understanding that the outcome is not entirely in our hands.
So it's about finding a balance between effort and acceptance.
Precisely. And when we can do that, we create space for more peace and freedom in our lives. We're no longer constantly trying to force things to go a certain way. We can relax into the present moment and trust that things will unfold as they should.
That's a really beautiful way to think about it. It's like surrendering to a higher power, even if you don't believe in a specific deity.
It's about trusting the process of life.
Okay. This is all starting to make a lot of sense. What's the final teaching we need to explore?
Meditation. It's like the culmination of all these teachings we've been discussing.
Okay. I have to admit, I've always struggled with meditation. I can never seem to quiet my mind long enough to actually experience any benefits.
I hear you. It's definitely a practice.
Yeah.
And it takes time to develop. But even a few minutes a day can make a difference.
What makes meditation so special? How does it actually help with overthinking?
Meditation is essentially training for your mind. It's like a gym for your thoughts and emotions.
So you're not necessarily trying to stop thinking altogether.
That's right. It's more about learning to observe your thoughts and feelings. Without getting caught up in them, you learn to notice them, acknowledge them, and let them go without judgment.
It's like creating space between you and your thoughts, so you're no longer controlled by them.
Exactly. And the more you practice meditation, the easier it becomes to access that space in your everyday life. You might find that you're less reactive to stressful situations, that you're able to let go of negative thoughts more easily, and that you feel more grounded and centered overall.
It's almost like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And in this case, the muscle is our ability to be present, aware, and non-judgmental.
I love that analogy.
And here's the really cool part. As you continue to practice meditation, you might start to experience moments of deep peace and stillness that were always there, just hidden beneath the surface of all that mental chatter.
Wow. That's a beautiful thought. It's like we already have the capacity for peace within us. We just need to learn how to access it.
Precisely. And meditation can help us do just that.
So as we wrap up the second part of our deep dive, I had a question for you. Of all the teachings we've discussed, which one stands out to you the most? Which one resonates with you on a personal level?
That's a great question. I think the one that's resonating most with me right now is the idea of self-compassion. I'm realizing that I'm often way too hard on myself, and that's probably contributing to my overthinking.
I think that's a common experience for many of us. We tend to hold ourselves to these impossibly high standards and then beat ourselves up when we inevitably fall short.
It's like we have this inner critic that's constantly judging and evaluating everything we do.
And that inner critic can be really loud. But what if, instead of trying to silence it, we learn to befriend it?
Befriend our inner critic. That sounds counterintuitive.
I know, right. But what if we started treating that inner voice with the same kindness and compassion that we would offer to a friend? What if we acknowledged its concerns, but also reminded ourselves of our strengths and our worthiness?
That's a really interesting perspective. I'm going to have to sit with that one for a while. I'm so used to trying to fight against those negative thoughts and judgments.
It's a different approach, for sure, but it can be incredibly liberating.
I'm definitely sensing a theme here. It's not about trying to force our minds to be a certain way. It's about cultivating a different relationship with our thoughts and emotions. It's about accepting ourselves as we are, flaws and all.
Beautifully said. And that's the essence of these Buddhist teachings, finding peace and freedom amidst the chaos of our minds.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I've gained so much clarity and insight.
I'm so glad to hear that. But we're not done yet. There's still one more important piece to this puzzle. Ready to dive into the final part of our exploration.
So far, we've explored a lot of ground in our deep dive into quieting that overthinking mind. We've touched on the importance of recognizing the impermanence of thoughts, cultivating mindfulness, challenging the idea that thoughts are facts, surrendering to what's beyond our control, and practicing self-compassion. We also talked about simplifying our lives, cultivating gratitude, letting go of attachment to outcomes, and even befriending our inner critic. And I'm really struck by how all these teachings, while rooted in ancient wisdom, are so incredibly relevant to the challenges we face in our modern lives.
It's like they had a blueprint for dealing with the overwhelm and anxiety that comes with our fast-paced, hyper-connected world.
Absolutely. And it all circles back to cultivating a deeper understanding of ourselves and our minds, and recognizing that true peace and freedom aren't found in external circumstances, but rather in our internal state of being.
Exactly. It's about shifting our focus from trying to control everything outside of ourselves to cultivating a sense of inner peace and stillness.
And that's where the final teaching we're going to explore comes in. Meditation. Now, I know we briefly touched on meditation earlier, but I think it's worth diving a little deeper.
Especially since many people, myself included, can find meditation to be a bit intimidating or even frustrating at times.
It's definitely a practice, and it takes time and patience to develop, but the benefits are truly profound. What I'm curious about is, how does meditation actually help with overthinking?
I think the best way to understand it is to think of meditation as a training ground for your mind. It's like a gym for your thoughts and emotions.
So you're not necessarily trying to stop thinking altogether.
That's right. It's more about learning to observe your thoughts and feelings without getting caught up in them. You learn to notice them, acknowledge them, and let them go without judgment.
It's like creating space between you and your thoughts, so you're no longer controlled by them.
Exactly. And the more you practice meditation, the easier it becomes to access that space in your everyday life.
You might find that you're less reactive to stressful situations, that you're able to let go of negative thoughts more easily, and that you feel more grounded and centered overall. It's almost like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And in this case, the muscle is our ability to be present, aware, and non-judgmental.
I love that analogy.
And here's the really cool part. As you continue to practice meditation, you might start to experience moments of deep peace and stillness that were always there, just hidden beneath the surface of all that mental chatter.
Wow, that's a beautiful thought. It's like we already have the capacity for peace within us. We just need to learn how to access it.
Precisely. And meditation can help us do just that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into taming the overthinking mind, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. What if, instead of trying to fix our overthinking minds, we simply acknowledge them with curiosity and kindness? What if we saw our thoughts as transient visitors, not permanent residents? And what if, in the spaces between those thoughts, we allowed ourselves to experience the peace that's always available to us, right here, right now?
That's a beautiful invitation. Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration. May you find peace and clarity amidst the busyness of your days.
And until next time, keep diving deep.